Hello girls, today we're going to take the first grammar lesson in Unit 5, page 43, the passive. Now let me give you an idea about the passive, so let's explain it. Let's look at this sentence. I drank 2 cups of coffee. It's a sentence in the past tense. So we call this sentence an active. This sentence is an active sentence. Why? Because it has subject, it has verb, and it has an object. The subject is I, the verb is drank, and the object is 2 cups of coffee. Now, what is the meaning of the subject? The subject is the person or thing that does the verb. And of course I have the verb drank, and then I have the object. What is the object? It's the person or thing that the action happens to. Okay, so in this sentence I have subject I have verb drank, and I have an object, and that is 2 cups of coffee. Alright, sometimes I wanted to start my sentence with the object. So I wanted to start my sentence with 2 cups of coffee. Why would I want to start my sentence with an object? Because I don't want to mention the subject for some reason. And I will tell you about the reasons later. Okay? So when we start with the object, we call that sentence passive sentence. Okay, so for example, I start with 2 cups of coffee, so I say 2 cups of coffee were drunk. So I started with the object and then I put the verb in the passive. So we can add by me if we wanted to mention the subject again, or we don't write it and we stop our sentence by 2 cups of coffee were drunk, and then we put full stop if we don't want to mention the subject, if the subject is not necessary. Okay, so now this is the passive. Okay, now how to make the passive in English? We make the passive by putting the verb to be into whatever tense we need, and then adding the past participle of the verb. So the rule is, in order to form the passive, you have to add verb to be, and you have to put verb to be in the same tense of the verb you have in the sentence, and then you change that verb into past participle. So for regular verbs, we make the past participle by adding, of course, ed to the infinitive. So for example, play becomes what? Played. But we have other irregular verbs that you have to study the past participle of. So let's go through the tenses and see how can we change them from active to passive. So present simple, I make a coffee, or I make a cake. It's an active sentence. Why? Because I have subject, verb, and an object. In the passive, we have to start with the object. So a cake. And then I put verb to be, and I have to put it in the same tense of the verb I have in the sentence. So here the verb is make, it's in the present. So I put verb to be in the present, it's is, and then I change this verb into past participle. So the past participle of make is made. So a cake is made by me, or just a cake is made. In the present continuous, I am making a cake. So again, you start with the object, a cake, and then you put verb to be in the same tense, and here you have present continuous, so you have the verb plus ing. So you have to put a cake is, okay, and then you put verb to be plus ing, because you have the verb here plus ing, and then you change this verb into the past participle. So a cake is being made by me. Past simple. I made a cake. So again, start with the object, a cake, and then made is in the past, so you put verb to be in the past, and it's singular, so a cake was. And then this verb, you put the past participle of it, it's make, made, made, so a cake was made by me. Past continuous, I was making a cake. So you start with a cake, and of course it's singular, so you put was, and then you put verb to be plus ing, because you have ing here in the verb, so it's being, and you put the verb in the past participle, made. So a cake was being made by me. Present perfect, I have made a cake. So you start with a cake, and then you have to put have or has. Here we change have into has because a cake is singular. So a cake has. And then you put verb to be in the past participle because after have you put verb in the past participle. So a cake has been, and then you put this verb in the past participle which is already in. So a cake has been made by me. Present perfect continuous tense, I have been making a cake. So when you change it into passive, you put a cake, and then you put has been, and then you put verb to be plus ing, so it's being, and then you put this verb in the past participle, made. So a cake has been made, has been being made by me. Past perfect, I had made a cake. So a cake had, and then you put verb to be in the past participle, had been, and then you change this verb into past participle, so it's already made. So a cake had been made by me. Future simple, I will make a cake. So again, a cake will, and after will you have to put verb to be. So after will you have to put it in the infinitive form, so it will be. So a cake will be, and you put the verb make in the past participle, it's made, so a cake will be made by me. Now if I say I am going to make a cake, and again I want you to change it into passive, so it's another form of the future simple. So you say a cake is going to be made by me. Future perfect, I will have made a cake. So you put a cake, you put will, you put have, and then you put verb to be in the past participle, like the verb here. So you put been, and then you put the past participle of the verb, it's made. So a cake will have been made by me. How if I want to change, what will happen if I wanted to change it back from the passive form into the active form? Now, if you have by me, you can start with I. But if you don't have an object here, or if you don't have something to start with, you can come up with any subject you want. But since you have here in the sentence by me, so you have to start with I. So you change by me into I again. Okay, and this is how to change the sentences from passive back to active. So you start with the subject I, okay, you put had, and instead of been, you cancel been, you deleted, you omitted, you don't write it, okay? So you don't write been, but instead you put the verb in the past participle. So I had made, and then a cake. You put the object. I had made a cake. Now let's take a look at this example. I have been making a cake. A cake has been being made by me. Now, if you have this sentence in the passive and you want to change it back into the active form, again, you have to start with the subject, and it's by me, so you change it to I. And then you cannot put has with I, so you change it to have. And then been, you put it back. And then you don't write verb to be, but you have to take the ing from it and you put it into the verb. So I have been making, okay, a cake. All right? Now, sometimes you have verbs with two objects. So some verbs that have two objects can make two different active sentences, because you have two objects, okay? So you can start with either one of those. And so two different passive sentences. So for example, verb give. He gave me the book. Now here you have two objects, me or the book, okay? So you can choose which one you want to start your sentence with. You can start with I, or you can start with the book. So you have two answers for the passive. If you wanted to start with I, you can say I, and then you put verb to be in the past, like the verb here. So I was, and then you change the verb into the past participle. So it's give, gave, given. So I was given, and then I was given what? The book. So I was given the book by him. Now if you wanted to start with the object, the book, so you say the book, and then again you put verb to be in the past tense, because you have the verb here gave in the past. So you put was, the book was, and then you change the verb into the past participle, which is given. So the book was given to me by him. Okay? Now this was an example, which is verb give. It was an example of the verb that has two objects. You have other verbs that have two objects, such as these verbs: ask, offer, teach, tell, lend, promise, sell, and throw. Now you can choose whatever object you wanted to start your sentence with. Okay. Now, the passive and subordinate clauses. You can make the passive and subordinate clause that has a subject and a normal conjugated verb. This is really the same as a normal passive. So let's take a look at the sentence. I thought that Mary had kissed John. So you put I thought as the same, you don't change it. So I thought that. And then you start with the object, John. You put had, and then you put verb to be in the past participle, it's been, and then this verb is already in the past participle, so you write it down. So John had been kissed by Mary. Active. He knew that people had built the church in 1915. So if you want to change it to passive, you write the same thing, he knew that. And then you find the object. The object here is the church. So that the church. And then you put had again. You put verb to be in the past participle, it's been. And then you put the verb in the past participle, built. So he knew that the church had been built in 1915. You can also make the passive using a passive gerund or a passive infinitive in the same place as a normal gerund or infinitive. So you can say the child loves being cuddled, it's a gerund, or she would like to be promoted, it's passive infinitive. Okay. Now, when should we use the passive? Remember, I told you that we have reasons sometimes that we don't want to mention the subject, or we don't want to mention who did the action. So we use the passive when we wanted to change the focus of the sentence. So for example, the Mona Lisa was painted by Leonardo da Vinci. We are most interested here in the painting than the artist in this sentence. Okay? So we are more concerned about the Mona Lisa, okay, than Leonardo da Vinci. So we don't want to mention who painted this painting. Number two, when who or what causes the action is unknown or unimportant or obvious or people in general. So he was arrested. Obvious agent, of course, he was arrested by who? By the police. So we don't need to mention the subject, the police. We don't want to mention who did this action. My bike has been stolen. We don't know who stole the bike. So the action is more important because some thief stole it. So it's an unknown agent. The road is being repaired. So of course the road is being repaired by some workers that are not important. So here the subject is not important, so unimportant agent. The form can be obtained from the post office people in general. So the form can be obtained from the post office by general people. So that's why we don't have to mention who did the action. So they are people in general. Or in factual or scientific writing, the chemical is placed in a test tube and the data entered into the computer. So the most important thing is the action, but the other thing is not important. The agent or who did the action is not important. Also, we do use the passive form in formal writing instead of using someone or people or they. This can be used in speaking or informal writing. So the brochure will be finished next month. Reason number 5 is in order to put the new information at the end of the sentence to improve style. So sometimes we don't want to mention who did the action just to improve our style of writing. So for example, 3 books are used regularly in the class. The books were written by Dr. Bell, and see, as you see, we put the person or the subject at the end. So Dr. Bell wrote the books and it sounds clumsy. Number 6, when the subject is very long. I was surprised by how well the students did in the test. So more natural than how well the students did in the test surprised me. Now let's go back to the book. And you have here reasons for using the passive. Number 1, the passive is used when we wanted to focus on the result of an action rather than on the person or people responsible for the action. So the World Heritage Convention was signed by the 190 member countries of UNESCO. Number 2, the passive is used when it's not important to say who does something or because it's obvious. And the list of protected sites, is added to every year, so it's obvious that the UNESCO does this. Number 3, the passive is frequently used in academic writing, reports, scientific texts, official announcements, and to describe a process. So the artifacts are inspected on site and then they are taken to the museum to be restored. So these are the reasons for using the passive. When we use passive sentence, we don't mention the person or thing responsible for the action, or we call that the agent. If it's obvious or who, what is responsible, we are not interested, it's not important, or we don't know. However, when the agent is important, we introduce it with the preposition by and we put it at the end of the sentence. Okay, thank you, and we'll see you again in other grammar lessons.